Heads up, everybody. I'm B. Francis Clark.
And I'm Anton Anderson.
And welcome to Sky is Black. All right, so on this future-facing Friday, we want to look at a couple of events that are coming up that A, we are excited about, and B, we are hopeful that will actually move us collectively forward as a people and definitely move those who are in attendance at these events forward, hopefully. So what we're talking about specifically, 3 events. One is Black Tech Week, which
just wrapped
up. The second is Black Week, which is coming up in October. Mm-hmm. And the third is the Africa Cinema Summit, which is also coming up in October. So let's start with Black Tech Week. Mm-hmm. You can find more information about this event at blacktechweek.com. And let me say before we jump into it that you and I are both very committed to technology. We love technology.
Yes.
As you know, I was one of the producers of the original Blacks in Technology conference back in the day that really talked about bridging the digital divide and taking technology seriously. So to me, Black Tech Week has taken that concept and taken it to the next level. So I'm beyond pleased and excited and proud of the work that they're doing. So your initial thoughts about this event?
You know, I actually wasn't able to attend. It truly just wrapped up. If you're watching this, it ended yesterday. If you're watching this right as it drops, it was July 16th through 18th in Cincinnati. So shout out to my colleagues there.
Shout out to Middletown. What up?
And what was great about this conference, in my opinion, was, looking at the schedule, was that this was really very much a, rubber meets the road kind of conference.
Yes.
Where, it's really geared for founders and investors and even students and brands that want to partner with them. Yes. But look at the schedule. It was like, how to design your product, how to move forward, how to calibrate your advertising. If you want to integrate AI, your path to the future. It was very much a conference designed around people who either have a business or are looking to start one and how to really get underway. In particular, and actually one of the reasons why I want to make sure I have it on my calendar for next summer, this middle part of July is tough for me schedule-wise, but they actually will do investor VC matching.
Yes.
So that way,
which to me is the very best feature of this event, in my estimation.
I think it's fantastic because being able to essentially do like speed dating with different sources of funding, because there's no shortage of ideas out there.
No, we have our fair share of them, yes.
And so then being able to get in front of the right people who might be able to fund you, I think is really fantastic. So
it's beyond fantastic. To me, this is really the heart of the matter, because what distinguishes this event from the one that I was involved in way back in the day, in the early days, is that we were just sort of chit-chatting. So we had an expo. We were featuring Black-owned businesses in the tech space. But the real highlight of the event was a symposium where people talked about issues and identified, obstacles for the Black community and communities of color. And that has its place.
If you're a professional, and I think that's important. I think it's really important.
It has its place. And it was timely then. What is happening right now is that people need money for their ideas, their businesses to go to the next level. And that to me is really what is at the heart of this event, which is why I'm so excited about it. To meet with VCs, to meet with funders in a non-threatening environment, in a non-competitive environment. So many times we have these, pitch competitions, like, you got 100 people coming in to vie for, 5,000, 10,000 or whatever, prize amount there is.
And that's fine. I mean, shout out to the Y Combinators and things like that.
And that has its place, Invest Fest and things like that. But to be able to sort of calmly, rationally sit one-on-one with someone and talk about your business idea, your business venture, to me is what makes this so very special. So I have high hopes for the people coming out of it.
And if you, dear viewer, if you actually were able to attend this conference, be sure to reach out to us. I always say this at the bottom of the show, but I'll say at the top, my email address.
Say what you need to say. Drop it like it's hot.
What I was trying to say is that for those of you who are watching this, and if you were at that conference, be sure to reach out to us. As I said, we usually say it at the bottom of the show, but I'll say it at the top. My email address is anton@skyisblack.com.
And you can reach me at bfrancisclark@skyisblack.com.
So please let us know if you were there. Check it out. So if you were there, please reach out to us. Tell us what you thought. Tell us what your highlights were. Just look at once again at the schedule. For me, the Biz Dev Day also was a day dedicated towards not only different from matching up with VCs and funders, but matching up with corporate partners.
Has its place. To me, it's all about the VCs.
You know what? I think there's an opportunity for both because, the larger companies, by getting them as your client or getting them as your customer, being able to partner with them, that's what allows you to get the economies of scale because once one of their partners was GE, and in Ohio, P&G is based there, and we've had a lot of things to say on the show about P&G. However...
Oh, yes.
However... If suddenly you're able to sort of jump into the slipstream of their supply chain, if you're able to have them hold their hands like this is a recommended vendor of ours, you're kind of a made man at that point, or made woman in particular. I think that having that kind of an opportunity, because
but how does that benefit, in your estimation, the Black community overall? So that definitely will benefit that individual company. And will definitely benefit, the larger corporation that they may be working for. But how does that benefit the Black community overall, in your estimation?
Well, one, I'll use a different example. Mm-hmm. I'll use one of our favorites that we've talked about before. Mm-hmm. I'll use A Dozen Cousins.
That's right.
Because
how Pookie and them doing?
Their food is fantastic. So dozencousins.com.
Yep.
And they make flavoring packets and marinades and prepackaged, ready-to-eat meals and things like that. And what's great about them is that, you can order directly from them, but also you can find them at Whole Foods and Costco and places like that. And so, they're partnering with these big, mainstream brands. And what that allows them to do, one, it allows them as a company to grow, because if you're getting distributed through Costco, you need to have your operations tight, and you need to be able to scale up and distribute. And to me, that means you're going to, one of two things is going to happen. Either you're going to flame out, which is bad news to answer your question, or you're going to step up and rise to the occasion and have your business grow. And ultimately, because if you go to Costco and you get I think that's the chickpeas, the curry, which are good, the Trinity curry chickpea thing, and I believe the Cuban black beans are also at Costco. But if that's what you get, and you're like, well, what else do they have? Mm-hmm. Then you'll go and you'll find, the coconut rice flavoring. Mm-hmm. You go and find the Jamaican jerk flavor marinade.
That's right.
So look back on one of our prior episodes to find us cooking that with that marinade. It's delicious.
It is.
And my point is that, but there's a viable company there that's able to then have these other product lines. So that way, when you're ready to explore and expand your repertoire with them, they're there and they're ready and they can scale up. And so that's why being in the slipstream is there, because there's so many times you try to, and I've had this experience where I've tried to order through a black-owned business or a small business, and they're like, sorry, out of stock. You go to your local small restaurant, sorry, out of stock. Even my favorite little bookstore, hey, I need this book. Sorry, out of stock. Mm-hmm. And because I'm driven a little bit as much by intention and mission as I am by just this need for now.
We're driven by the soul.
Thank you.
Driven by the soul.
So I'll still come back as opposed to having it be totally fungible and going to the next establishment. Mm-hmm. But if your supply chain is able to handle, Target as your customer, Whole Foods as your customer, Costco as your customer, and for Dozen Cousins, it's the latter of those two, then you're going to be ready. So when that order comes in, for you just as your little household, they're going to be ready. They're not going to say out of stock, out of stock, out of stock. Of course, I'm jinxing it by saying that. Probably go to the website to out of stock. Yes. But whatever they're out of stock of, stay on that list, because whatever they're out of stock of is good.
Wakanda seasoning packet, stand up.
I want that jollof rice seasoning to come back. If any of you from folks from Dozen Cousins are listening in, bring that back.
Indeed.
So my point is, though, is that partnering with the brands, and because this conference is in Cincinnati, Ohio, you've got proximity to GE and P&G. Those are the first two that come to mind. I think AWS also has a Midwest presence there from the tech standpoint.
They have a presence everywhere.
Well, that's a different thing. But my point is that I think that being able to have that is co-equally important with having the VC, because if you're already an established business and you may not want to sell your soul to a VC, because sometimes that's what happens, then maybe you just need that first big customer. You just need that, if you make a widget that goes, in an aircraft or something, if you've got that manufacturing business and you need your first big customer because you've reinvented this thing, or you can tweak, 2% more efficient use of fuel or whatever it is. You've got something you've invented. You need a place to apply that.
Ethiopian Airlines, stand up.
Right, but their engines are made by GE, so that's the point. And so I think that is so super important. In my opinion, co-equal with the VCs. Because, once again, this isn't just about people who are launching their business, but people who actually also have a business.
Yes, but as we move into the future, though, we need to fund new businesses.
Sure.
And so we're not trying to replicate the model that exists today. We're not trying to have the dominant corporations that exist today become even stronger and more powerful going forward. We want to build some competition. We want to build a Black-owned ecosystem that is sustainable. And to me, that's going to come the route of VCs as opposed to the other real-world contemporary supplier, manufacturer model.
Sure. I mean, I'm not really.
So it's the future-facing piece. So to me, that again, that's going to come via VC.
And those VCs are going to be people who had a business and they partnered up with some mainstream guy, made a lot of money, and then decided to become an investor. Good. I think it all works. So,
in your estimation, what is the best case scenario that comes out of this particular conference? The last thing that we want as we think about building a better future for our children and our children's children is to have people come together, chit-chat, and not doing anything meaningful. In your estimation, what is the best thing that could come out of this conference that actually propels us forward in a meaningful way?
Well, I don't know if this really happened, but for example, going back to my earlier point with regards to mainstream corporations, in my fantasy, there would be, like one of the things they had happening was they had, let's say like some sort of food truck lunch, right? And so everyone's there eating lunch. And let's say there was this one gal who had invented this sprocket that reduced wear and tear on turbines by 3%, something like that. So that way the maintenance cost can be 3% less on either any kind of turbine technology, whether we're talking jet engines or gas-fired turbines, something to do with, like, I'm making it up, so forgive me, Madam Engineer. But anything that has like some sort of planetary gear rotation type of thing, that there was a special way of tweaking it to where it would be more efficient. So she's got this idea. She's got the prototypes, and she's got her PhD in material science, and she's doing her thing.
Relaxing, enjoying the day, having her shrimp etouffee.
In Ohio? Come on.
No. This is a Black event.
Yeah,
we can have that.
Okay.
Potentially anywhere, so maybe not the shrimp etouffee.
Maybe, I'm not sure. Maybe there was a great food truck there at the lunch. So my point, though, is
at least some strong barbecue. At least some strong barbecue.
That in Ohio, I've had excellent barbecue in Ohio. So there, I'll get that. So she's there, and she's just, maybe she got a little bit of a friends and family round to do her engineering. She's got her thing.
She got her peoples.
And so then, she was walking out to lunch because she went to the VC matchmaking thing, and so they're talking and they're walking over to get some lunch at the barbecue food truck, because I'm not ready to think that you're going to get good shrimp etouffee in Ohio, but maybe you would. Maybe I'm wrong. It doesn't matter.
Don't sleep on our peoples, but go ahead.
It doesn't matter. But then right behind them, as the two of them are talking, is some dude from like GE Aerospace. And, while this woman and this VC are chit-chatting, he overhears their conversation. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is why you go to in-person conferences. And he overhears, and let's say it's a Black manager at GE Aerospace. And he's like, really? 3% on maintenance, saving 3% on any kind of turbine. Why? Because of the whatever, and she's like, yes. In fact, I've got my friends and family round, my pre-angel round. I'm talking to this investor for my Series A, so that way we can spin up our manufacturing and everything else. And he's like, well, with our wind turbine business with GE and with our gas turbine business, at GE Aerospace, 3% makes a big difference, at scale. And so we would love to talk to you. And the VC says, that's great, because I was just asking her about how's she going to get her first big customer. And suddenly all three of them win. The woman who started the business, my hypothetical woman with her sprocket, the VC just found someone to invest in and now feels secure and doesn't have to feel like he's doing like some sort of DEI hire, to bring her in, because suddenly they already have the connection to the big sale where they're going to sell 20 gajillion of these little sprockets that create a 3% cost savings, which essentially is revenue made. And so that, obviously all hypothetical, but having the thing I like about conferences like this is that it creates opportunity for serendipity.
It does.
And to me, that is why, if this is the space you're in, especially if you live in the Midwest, put it on your calendar, mid-July next year, because I think that's what moves us forward. And even if...
Go ahead.
This is where you say even if.
Even if...
Even if something like that didn't happen exactly that way, people are still going to be overhearing conversations, and people are still going to be mixing and mingling and cross-pollinating in ways that they wouldn't have done otherwise. And so if that scenario is sort of my dream scenario, but even if you get 1/3 of that, where the VC talks to the inventor, or the VC is talking to the person in industry saying, hey, if you know of anyone who's doing these things, we're looking, anything that shaves the cost off, we're looking. I mean, those things, percolate through people's minds.
Oh, they percolate.
And it's a phone call that happens a week, a month, or a couple months later that still then moves on going, remember, I met you at that conference and now I have an idea for you. And so I think this sort of opportunity, especially for those of us in our community, you might say, well, isn't that true for all conferences? Yes, it is. But I think in particular for our community, we have a strong desire to, much like we are, to move our people forward.
Yes, which is why my serendipitous fantasy, using yours, would be not that these two players, the VC and the sister eating her etouffee / barbecue, and her part for a sort of a turbine engine, they don't necessarily connect with a larger mainstream company, but they actually connect with someone else at the conference who says, I'm looking to get into the turbine business. Well, that's fantastic. I actually have a part that will save 3%, or be 3% more efficient. And with this part, you can actually take on the big boys, as opposed to making the big boys stronger. She and the VC would be able to sort of pair up with another player that is Black-owned and move the culture forward in a different kind of way.
Sure. Right on. I mean...
So in terms of fantasies,
sure,
that to me is the ultimate. Not that we're
sure
further empowering an already dominant corporation, but actually giving power and fuel to the upstart.
And just to continue, since we're in this fantasy, I would have a fourth person in line at the food truck who's like an IP attorney go up to this woman inventor going, hey, let me help you out. So that way you don't sign an exclusive agreement with GE Aerospace. So that way you can become a viable. I'm still. I like having the catapult from the main. I mean, take the gravity. I'm switching metaphors. Take the gravity assist from the big planet to move yourself forward and faster. I say take it. It doesn't really hurt the big player, but it can help you tremendously. And so I like that idea, and this is actually me changing my tune from many years ago.
It doesn't hurt the main player, but it does hurt the possibilities for up and coming players who have aspirations of becoming main players.
I'm not sure I agree with that.
Okay.
And the reason being is that let's continue to play with this idea of this woman making the sprocket, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm focused on the etouffee because it's still around lunchtime.
No,
so.
and that would be delicious.
Yes,
I'm really down for the barbecue. I want a good hot link, or like a good soulful version of that Cincinnati chili.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is that we're talking about like time to market, right? And so how fast you come into the market, how fast you appear in the marketplace, and just playing with it. And ladies and gentlemen, we're speculating. I don't know the ins and outs of GE Aerospace, but I would imagine that, GE Aerospace, they're at scale already.
They are.
And so they can immediately place the big order, and they can immediately place the thing that makes our fantasy woman here, that gets her business off the ground and makes her, a player in the industry. Now, if that fourth person behind me makes sure that her IP is protected, because the thing is that, let me walk with me for a second. So she does that, she's at scale, so then she becomes big enough to where she can ward off and stave off the knockoffs, because invariably, no matter what innovation that happens out there, especially in the material sciences space where you can't keep it behind some kind of a block somewhere, someone's going to knock it off. Especially if you do your manufacturing offshore. So scenario A is you take the gravity assist from the big player. Now scenario B is you're small, making your small, you're a small play, making your sprockets. You find someone to run with your scenario. Hey, I'm looking to get into the turbine business, and you can help me make this more efficient turbine. But they're also new to the market. So you're both new to the market, and you're kind of like, and maybe you've got like the new hot thing.
Right.
But the problem is...
But market dominance doesn't necessarily have to happen overnight. You sort of look at a NVIDIA, which is totally dominant in the space right now,
right.
but wasn't a year ago, wasn't 2 years ago. Now, they've been in business for a long time, growing, and now doing big and major things. And so in terms of the model that you have, success is not necessarily determined in a tiny, tiny window.
Fair enough. But my point is that the opportunity cost for her saying, I'm not going to deal with the big players. I want to focus exclusively on the small guy who's just breaking in, is that, once again, just playing with the fantasy scenario where the GE guy overheard that there's a sprocket that'll save 3%. And then there's a fifth guy behind there who's the small guy who wants to get into turbines.
Well, again, the ultimate fantasy is that they poached that guy from GE and said, we got a great idea. It's a black-owned business. Brother, you need to come over here and roll with us.
And fine, but you're still the small play. And the thing is that then what happens is, and what I fear is...
Small play today, taking names down the road.
Sure, right on. I would love for that to happen. And yet what is also likely to happen simultaneously with them growing is that someone's going to knock off Homegirl Sprocket and say, and maybe they won't do it just as well because it's a knockoff, but they'll save 2.5%, which is, the majority of the savings, the majority of the benefit that would accrue to the big play because they knocked it off, but then our gal gets none of that. And so to me, the answer is yes, and make sure you don't have an exclusive agreement. Work with the guy who's looking to get into the turbine business, poach whoever you want to poach, but continue with the gravity assist by working with the big play. And
but which model moves us forward?
Both. In fact,
you think they're both equal?
In fact, actually, I would say, to your point, it's not two different models. It's not A or B. I say do both. If you can get the gravity assist, if you can get the assist, if working with the big company accelerates you and lets you move and attack the marketplace better, go for it and keep your eyes open. Don't say, oh, well, I don't have to put on my pants one leg at a time anymore because I'm working with GE. No, you still look for that opportunity to look for the next person who's going to say, hey, yeah, we're going to do something. We're doing underwater turbines that will use your sprocket. Well, look for that other small play that's going to be new to the market, that's going to be a disruptor. Look for that guy or gal at the same time, And because you've worked with the big play, you're a funded business. You're not struggling to make payroll, and which gives you the ability to come up above, a little bit higher up, look at the horizon a little bit, and see where those opportunities are to work with the smaller, more innovative guy. And then maybe that eats their lunch. Maybe that becomes like the next NVIDIA type story. And it's a little harder because we're talking about like infrastructure and stuff like that, dealing with sprockets. But I mean, substitute software, substitute whatever. But my point is that it isn't a choice A or B. I would say do both. If you can get that essentially free gravity assist that helps you a lot, but doesn't take anything away from the big play.
Well, see, there is nothing free in the world. That's the thing.
It's not really free. And for those of you who are in physics, yes, when you do the gravity assist around Jupiter slows down by 1/10,000,000th of a second or something. So
Slingshot, baby.
There's actual conservation of energy happening. I'm not like mystical about it, but my point is that doing that doesn't creates a benefit. All of them are a win. And so to answer your question, what's the fantasy scenario? What would be the best scenario? Would be for some sort of serendipitous event to happen where a small business gets started and is able to become funded and successful coming out of this conference. How it happens could be any of the scenarios we've been just imagining, but I think that is the benefit.
I'm not sure all roads necessarily lead to where we want to go. In terms of imagining a future, a Black-owned ecosystem that is sustainable, I'm not sure if all roads necessarily lead there. And so in terms of looking at these two sort of fantasy scenarios, I do think the better scenario long-term is the linkages that happens, or the links that happen between Black-owned individuals or enterprises.
You're not going to hear me argue against that. All I'm trying to say is that...
And it doesn't mean that they're going to win, but in terms of the road that is the one that will get us to where we want to be in the future, it most likely starts there, in my estimation. So people can always pivot. You could be making a case that all roads do lead to the place we want to go, or can merge into a single road that gets us to where we want to go.
I don't think there's a single road that gets us there.
There's an argument that could be made for that, but ultimately, when we're talking about a Black-owned ecosystem, it fundamentally has to be Black-owned, and so when we're working for the interests of larger mainstream corporations, does that actually propel us forward, or does it in a bigger way hold us back?
Well, I don't think that looking at plausible futures, or maybe I should say, plausible futures, I would say.
Well, the plausible future is the one that we actually consciously and deliberately create.
Correct.
Ideally.
And I also believe that in those futures, there are very likely to be large corporations. And the trajectory that we're on, it's more likely than not that large corporations will exist in most scenarios of the future that we are looking to move to.
I'm certainly not disagreeing with that.
And so my point is you can either you can tilt at the windmill and try to defeat them or go around them or pretend they don't exist, which I think is leaving money and opportunity on the table. And so all I'm trying to say is that if the opportunity presents itself for you to get, and I'll continue to use my metaphor, if you're able to get that gravity assist, that accelerates your business in a disproportionate way.
Just don't spill the etouffee when you're making that turn.
Fair enough. Yeah, hold on, strap in, put some foil on that plate, whatever you need to do. But while you're doing that, still be open to the opportunity, because otherwise, if you run your business to where you have blinders on, to where you only work with XYZ major aerospace player,
Well, one could say blinders, or one could say focus.
You could, but
it depends on how you look at it.
But then either you have a leadership problem, either for you as the founder, or you have a problem with your board. Someone needs to be looking out at the horizon and seeing what some of the other opportunities are. And so I would like to think that, at least in our imagined person here, that they would have a vision and intentionality, because all these things we're talking about, to your point, have to have intentionality.
Right, but we're not talking about the success of a single business. We're talking about a Black-owned ecosystem going forward.
Right, but that's exactly what I just said. And so intentionality of aiming towards increasing and making sure that we are moving our people forward writ large. I don't necessarily have a belief that there will be just continuing on with GE, that there will be GE at whatever size it is, multi-billion-dollar company, and then there will be Black GE, a multi-billion-dollar company. I mean, if that's the way it ends up, sure, great.
Well,
however,
and that is my point, is that, I mean, there is no Black GE at the moment. There is no quote-unquote Black Apple or Black NVIDIA or Black Tesla or Black any of these sort of major corporations, and there won't be unless one is focused.
But my point is
shrewd in the decisions that they're making going forward, even at the earliest stage when you're chit-chatting over etouffee.
Right. So just be intentional about it. Be intentional about it. Be intentional. I think we're both saying the same thing. If you're intentional, almost, fair enough. But if you're intentional about it, saying, my goal is to make a sprocket and to work with the next Black GE, or with the Black GE, which may or may not exist at the moment. Fine. If you say that, if that's either you as a founder or if your board comes to that consensus and you say that is our North Star that guides us, if suddenly working with the current extant GE accelerates us to that, great. And if it doesn't, but gives us the working capital to where then we can do it maybe a little later, great. And if perchance you see some dude who's like, hey, I'm the next Black GE, great. It's not either or, is all I'm saying. And I think the key to all of it is having that intentionality and saying, I'm not just doing this to make a bucket of money and go home. I'm doing this with a purpose. And if you have that, then all these things we've been talking about are possible.
But it might be either or if all of us are making that decision that it's okay to choose one or the other, and the choice usually becomes the larger one. So we're going to go with the white GE just because we're used to it and it's out there and it's the bigger one. If we're constantly making that choice, then there will be no Black GE.
Then you weren't being intentional.
Fair enough.
Because if you're making that choice with no thought about where you're actually trying to go and does it actually take us there, then you weren't being intentional, and so you're just going with wherever the wind goes, and that's the difference between, ladies and gentlemen, between a gravity assist and being in orbit.
Float on, float on. What is the name of that song?
I don't know. I'm too busy laughing at my own clever metaphor.
Float on is where it's at, though.
All right.
So anyway, hopefully those who are participating in this conference will make the shrewd long-term decisions that will ultimately benefit them as individual entrepreneurs, and hopefully by extension the larger global Pan-African community, because I don't think the decisions are disconnected. We do live in a global ecosystem, and we are affected by what are seemingly small decisions. So hopefully the decisions that are made are strong ones and good ones.
Amen.
Amen.
I'm all in favor of it. Anyway, I think this was a great conference, and be sure to once again go to blacktechweek.com and check out their calendar. They probably still have stuff up there. In fact, I'm sure they still have stuff up there from this year's conference, but circle back there regularly. You can find them also on Twitter X and on Instagram and LinkedIn. But look for them and find out when the next conference is going to be and check it out.
And Black Tech Week comes out of the Lightship Foundation, which was started by Candace and Brian Brackeen, BRACKWEEN. And you can get information about that at lightship.foundation. So one love, one love, one love.
Right on.
So anything else you want to say about Black Tech Week?
I want to plan to go. I've got some folks there in Cincinnati that I need to visit anyway. So,
Well, like I said, my father/stepfather is from Middletown, Ohio. So my roots are very much there. Again, as I said earlier, what up, Middletown? All right. So the second event that we want to look at today on this Future-Facing Friday is a new event called BLACKWEEK, which is coming up again in October 15th through the 18th.
in New York.
In New York, and you can get information about this at blackweek.co. Again, this is a brand new event, and the question that I have for you is, do you think this event actually constitutes what we define as pure blackness? Is this an event that you think can propel both the individuals participating and the larger black community forward in light of what the values and priorities are for this particular expo?
I think so, frankly. I mean, this event is very much about a couple of things. They have said very specifically that they're about reigniting the conversation with regards to diversity in the business space. They want to, make sure that there is appropriate VC investment in black-owned businesses, and and making sure that these investments not only drive towards increasing business, but also increasing equity in black and brown, by the way, communities.
Amen.
So, and part of their emphasis is talking about the impact that black and brown creators have on our economy and making sure that it's rewarded and invested in appropriately. One thing in particular that really struck me with regards to this conference is that, and conferences cost money to attend, right?
They do.
And so, to have the events and to do all the things, and so generally they require some level of investment by the attendees. I like in particular the way that they kind of re-leveled things a little bit, because it's well known.
Yes.
It's well known that just talking about gender disparities, that there's a disparity between what men make. If a man for any given job makes $1, women will make, in general, will make like 80 some odd cents. Now, when it comes to black and brown women, if you're a black woman, you get 70 cents on the dollar. And if you're a Hispanic woman, you only get 65 cents on the dollar.
Yes, it's criminal.
And I mean, which I think, yes, criminal, frankly.
Yes.
I get kind of riled up about this.
Justifiably so.
And so,
About to storm something.
but I think that I appreciate the fact that they then have tried to balance that out.
Yes.
By this is geared primarily towards attendees who are looking to start businesses, or executives in extant businesses. It's sort of at least from their materials, what looks like their target that they're going for. And they have special packages for women executives that are priced lower. Or you could say that the price for men is higher. Call it any way you want.
And do you think that's fair? You think
Yes.
that's appropriate and just?
Yes, because this conference, at least from what I can tell, seems to be geared towards individuals who are looking to either have a business, so they're an executive in a business, they're ideally, or I guess theoretically, a founder, or an executive in the business, or someone who's looking to start one. And so to me, it's a known fact that the if you're paid less, your economic power is less, which means that if the conference costs, $1,000, let's say, you as a black woman are only going to have $700 worth of economic power. The prices are different, so go check out the website. This is just for making the math easy. So I think it's great for them to say, well, if you're a woman, maybe the conference costs $1,000 because they can't lose money. But they say, but if you're not a woman, then the conference costs $1,100 or whatever it is. Is it going to be?
We need to get Mrs. Anderson to register and then throw in a +1 in there for you.
Listen, I'm always her +1.
I know that. I know that's right.
I mean,
I know that's right.
I'm always her +1. I'm always thrilled to be her +1, and she's doing amazing things.
Indeed.
Which is the subject of a whole different episode and shout out.
Indeed. Go Bears.
You're funny. But the point is, though, is that if you're looking to try to level things out a little bit, then you should adjust for the economic buying power of the people that are attending. And, you could go down that rabbit hole and go way, way deep and have, all kinds of algorithms to determine the exact price for you or the exact price for me very specifically. But
the reparations cost is free.
Well, it depends on who's putting on the conference. But the thing is, though, that I think by just simply using a very broad brush, and admittedly, it's a blunt instrument to say, you know what,
in non-artistic hands for sure.
Well, I mean, it's an easy slice to say, you know what, just purely on gender, there's a difference in economic buying power, and so we as a conference are going to take a stand against that and adjust our pricing to compensate for it. Do I think it's fair? Frankly, I do.
And for the record, so do I.
And I mean, will it be a little bit more painful for me specifically to go because it's going to cost me a little bit more versus if my wife was there and I was, well, they probably would charge me, and they should charge me the rack rate or, the male rate if I come as her +1 and let her pay the different rate. I think that's fair, and I think because the economic buying power is different, I think the rates can be different, especially in this conference because they're trying to make a point as well, and so I think it's great. I think that having that, making that awareness present in an economic forum, I think also makes the point of saying, hey, when you start setting up you're founding your company, right? You're launching your company, you're growing, you've got HR, you've got all these things. Maybe you need to make sure you don't perpetuate those disparities.
Absolutely.
So I think that if nothing else, by having that difference in the fee, the entrance fee, I think they're making an important point and making it clear that we need to clean up that disparity.
I agree. 1,000%. All right, so I want to read something else that they say in terms of what this conference is about. They say 7 Black and Latino agency founders, one goal. We founded BLACKWEEK to bring together the most dynamic executives, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders for real conversations about the future of inclusion. The future of inclusion. So going back to my original question, is the future of inclusion synonymous with pure blackness?
Yes.
How so?
Well, and dear viewer, you're going to see me jump to a different metaphor.
Float on.
If you're making a painting, there's got to be some black in there somewhere. I mean, unless you're just going to have just a blank canvas, you're going to have some black in there somewhere. Even if you say, well, I'm going to only use white paint. Unless you're going to somehow, even when that painting is viewed, there's going to be a shadow. So there's going to be some black in there somewhere.
Okay.
And so and if you're going to have colors, any kind of texture, anything in there, you're going to have some black in there. And so my thinking is that you're going to include some black in that painting somewhere. And depends on what kind of painting you're making, how much that is. And that is more about like the actual thing that you're doing. But there's going to be some black in there. And so to me it's obvious. I mean, it's just simply you have to. Otherwise, you're not actually doing the thing. And so more than anything else, it's reminding everyone that you got to have it. You can't. I mean, there's some who are like, "Oh, you can't have. Well, this inclusion. It's bad for. It's bad for us." But I should have brought it with me. If you have a chance, ladies and gentlemen, our dear sister Lupita wrote a great book called Soulway, and it's a kid's book. And in that book, it talks about.
It's in our Skies Black Bookshop.
Yeah, it is. And in that book, it talks about this black girl who is feeling bad about her skin color, about why she's so dark and everything else. And she has, this is a spoiler alert for a kid's book, so bear with me. But in the book, she has this dream where, this person talks about, daytime versus nighttime, and how everyone was celebrating how wonderful it is for the day, and how beautiful the sun is, and da-da-da-da-da, to the point to where the daytime sister, nighttime, got offended and said, "Fine, peace, I'm out." And suddenly there was no darkness. It was daytime all the time. And everyone was hot and miserable, and it was terrible. And they said, and there were no shadows, there's no respite from the heat or the sun or the light. No one could sleep, no one could do anything. Because without in order to have balance, you had to, in this particular story, you had to have day and night, and that that night and darkness is beautiful, and the colors are different, and the glitter, you can't see the stars during the daytime. You can't rest. You can't have the cool evening breeze without nighttime. And the point of the book was simply to value and to appreciate that darkness, that aspect of it, and in particular for this little girl to appreciate her dark skin and how beautiful it is.
That's right.
And so for this conference, it's simply reminding people, for those who want to say, no, we only want daytime. You actually don't. It isn't going to work, and there's got to be that. You got to have all of it in there. And for those of you who aren't part of the Black diaspora, we didn't say at the opening, we focus on experts, innovators, and entrepreneurs of the Black diaspora in particular.
Yes.
And you might say, well, I'm not part of the Black diaspora. Why should I care? And the reason why you should care is that we all need each other. Because if it was nighttime all the time, just to run with that for a second, that would be a different problem. And so we all need each other. We all should be co-equal. We all, not the same, co-equal, difference. And we can all work together harmoniously, and then we all win. We all do better if that happens. And so to me, this conference is about essentially reminding everyone and emphasizing that specific fact. You got to have a little black in there somewhere.
But do we all do better with this particular model that's coming out of this conference? Because to me, what is driving much of it is, again, you have these CEOs and founders of these agencies who are appealing to mainstream corporations, saying, okay, you have a marketing budget, and we deserve a little bit more of that budget because our culture is strong. It drives so many things in the economy. Look to us to make your businesses stronger. And so to me, that's really why I'm asking, do we think this is an example of pure blackness in a way that's actually going to benefit the overall black community, or just these particular agencies who are going to get a bigger budget to work with going forward, working for the Nikes of the world, the GEs of the world, the Amazons of the world, et cetera, that certainly has a place, and that will certainly benefit these individuals and individual companies. But again, sort of keeping with what this platform is about, Sky is Black, Do we think this is an example of pure blackness that is going to benefit us going forward and help create the kind of world that we want to see going forward for our children and beyond?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
So let's just say that fill in the blank agency suddenly gets a bigger budget with Netflix, let's just say. And shout out to Miles Worthington over at Worthy Company.
Yes, indeed. For sure.
So let's say they suddenly get this budget. One, going back to our earlier comments earlier, presuming that these companies are intentional, and I'll admit that's an assumption, but presuming that they're intentional, and by the looks of everything they're trying to do with this conference, they're being intentional, then odds are they're going to be intentional about who's on their team. They're going to be intentional about where they're renting their office space. They're going to be intentional about their vendors moving downstream. They're going to be intentional about what they do and do not choose to show. So they're not going to necessarily sell us up or down the river. And they're going to push back when almost kind of like the Hollywood shuffle, and they're like, no, make it blacker. They're going to be in a position to push back on that. And so potentially, like I said, I'm assuming intentionality. I've got some base assumptions that are in here.
Yeah.
And so to me, yes, it does move us forward, because then we just talking about marketing for a second and that sort of thing. But then we have the kind of images out there in the sphere of public discourse that have some of our sensibility baked in there. There's going to be a little bit of black in that painting. There's going to be a little bit of black, in that messaging. There's going to be a little bit of black in that, and I think that.
But do we want a little bit of black, or do we want pure blackness going forward?
You want all of it.
Okay.
But you want all of it. And my point is that if these agencies are getting funding from these larger entities, and they're able to bring some of our sensibilities, and they're able to then, with the resources they get back, be intentional about how they guide those, I think that benefits all of us. And not only does it benefit all of us,
it certainly benefits the corporations that are funding, arguably, the exploitation of our community.
So my point is that I think that if these agencies are intentional, I think that the resources that they get, they can then move downstream that benefits our community. But then also moving upstream, these organizations, I'm just going to play with Netflix for just a minute. Once again, I'm not affiliated with them. And so I'm speculating, I'm being hypothetical.
Supercell, stand up.
Well, right. I have that on my mind. But yes, even just pivoting to that for a second, if all of a sudden you're creating content that's aimed towards the black community, and people watch it, and so Netflix makes money, because their subscriber base grows, because they're creating content that's compelling, and these agencies, helped market that and create that. Well, then suddenly you've got more black actors being hired. You've got and more black producers and more black directors. And once again, assuming, and it's a big assumption, that people are being intentional about it, maybe because you're watching this podcast. Then you're going to then also hire black-owned craft services. You're going to rent from black-owned equipment companies that will rent you cameras and studio space and all those sorts of things. And so you can use these resources to continue to grow our black ecosystem. And then maybe some guys decide to spin off, because right now the current set of studios that are in place right now with Amazon studios and Apple studios and Netflix studios is different from the studios that were in place not even 50 years ago, 30 years ago. There's a different set of studios. And so maybe one of these guys decides, hey, I'm going to spin off and do my own production company. And maybe it grows, and maybe they capture lightning in a bottle, and next thing you know, they're the next Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
But how'd they get their start? When they're sitting there at one of these conferences 20 years from now, well, how'd you get your start? Oh, well, I was doing this thing at Netflix. Remember Netflix? And everyone's like, oh yeah, I remember them. And
the only difference,
they're talking about how they were working with this incredible agency that then helped promote this show that allowed him to have enough momentum to spin off and then start his own thing. And so once again, it comes back to being intentional. And so if we're intentional about making sure that we are doing things that advocate for all of our people, then I think that it can be a win once again for everyone. And I'll admit, I'm a big believer in a win for everybody, because I'm not anti anyone.
No one is anti anyone.
And so my point is that by having this come up and come forward and be a ongoing, intentional effort,
right,
I think everyone wins.
Right. It can be a win-win, but under this model, potentially, again, this is just speculative. Again, it seems to be the thrust of it is about using our culture and our Black creativity and genius to enrich these other mainstream corporations. Long term, I think that hurts us and arguably destroys us, as opposed to making it better for all of us.
Well, I mean, no one can deny the influence of Black creators. I mean, that's where agencies, that's where.
So to me, this could be considered an extraction.
But that goes back to intentionality, and you have to be, when these guys and when the creators are working with these organizations, they need to be eyes open about it and say, and you see that in the Black creator revolt that happened at TikTok and places like that. You see that sort of pushback because they were eyes open about, hey, you know what? The flow of information. Hey, we're not getting the same revenue from our stuff as these other guys are. And making sure that there's parity,
right?
And so I mean that's how you lessen the extraction effects.
And I'm not saying that it is an extraction. I'm just having the dialogue because I think it's important. Because if we go around making decisions unconsciously, I don't think that we're going to end up in the place that we want to be ultimately. So
none of this works if you're not paying attention. None of this works.
You have to be conscious and deliberate about what we're doing and asking these particular questions. Is this an extraction or not? And I'm not, disparaging anybody who's involved in this conference at all. I don't think it's an either or situation. Most things are both and. I say this all the time. But there's some things that we need to be mindful of and concerned about if we want to expand the Black-owned ecosystem going forward for our children and beyond. That doesn't happen accidentally. And so we need to have a critical and cultural lens about everything.
And I think that's what this conference is doing. I mean, they're very deliberately looking to create economic opportunity for Black and brown businesses, and I applaud them for it. And I definitely am going to have this on my radar for October. So it's October 15th through 18th, which is a Tuesday through Friday in New York City. BLACKWEEK.co.
Yes, and going back to our conversation about they cloned Tyrone, is inclusion annihilation?
No.
So again, these are executives, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders for real conversations about the future of inclusion. Does inclusion from a corporate point of view actually mean the annihilation of our culture ultimately?
No. And go back and look at our prior episode to see more about that.
I think the jury's still out on that. I don't think the jury is. I don't think there's a question about the motivation for the individuals involved in this particular conference. But again, I think the jury is still out on whether or not inclusion, as defined by the mainstream, means our annihilation, just the extraction of our culture with no real long-term benefit to us as a people, economically or otherwise.
And just to be clear, you were talking about assimilation as annihilation earlier.
But right.
And to me, being participating and having inclusion is different from assimilating.
Yes, it is.
And to not
Yes,
back
it is.
up on my prior statements from our other episode, I also do not believe that assimilation means homogenization.
That's the only definition of assimilation, but I mean, I feel you on that.
My definition of assimilation is not homogenization. And so
I don't think there's any other definition of it, but I hear what you're saying.
So my whole point is that, going back, go watch the other episode, but no one puts their gumbo in the blender. So, or you shouldn't. Please, dear viewer, don't put your gumbo in the blender.
Right.
And so,
because
that's
you're saying don't put it in the blender. You're saying keep it integrated, which I agree. So integration and assimilation are not the same thing. So to me, I think you're advocating for integration.
But to me, I'm saying include it. By having that good andouille is inclusion. And
I always thought that I was going to have a restaurant called Andouille, just as an aside. I like that name.
I love that name.
Yeah.
And so, having the andouille in the gumbo is inclusion, and it's
and integration, but not assimilation. In my argument,
but the fact that, but I think that having it be, if, and it should be if it isn't already, but having gumbo be, and I don't even know who's the person in charge of this, but having gumbo be part of the the canonical food of this country.
Well, my great grandfather could be in charge of that.
Okay, that's
from
fine.
Louisiana, from Lake Charles. Stand up.
But my point is that to me, that's the assimilation part. Is the part to where it's like, okay, when we're talking about what are canonical American foods, and gumbo is included in that. That is the assimilation part of it, because you've not been comprehensive if you've not included this particular thing, and yet it's not blended and homogenized, because otherwise that's not the thing.
Still a vision of integration as opposed to assimilation, but I hear you.
We're thin slicing.
The heart and the spirit is there, and I'm with you 1,000%. It's right there.
Ladies and gentlemen, don't put your gumbo in the blender, please, dear God.
We are looking forward to it. We are hoping that great things come out of this particular conference. We believe in it and hope that we'll be shrewd and savvy about what we do with the information and the experiences that we have there. Black Week. Stand up.
Right on.
All right, so there's one more event that we want to talk about on this future-facing Friday.
Also happening in October, by the way.
Yes, specifically October 7th through the 10th. It is the Africa Cinema Summit. And so we've been talking about storytelling, and the reason we talk about storytelling on this platform is because it has a unique power to propel us and move us forward. Images matter, stories matter, storytelling matters, both in the positive and in the negative. Those who dislike us and are opposed to us as people have used storytelling and images to harm us and create a vision of the world that is false and doesn't exist. And the opposite is also true, that images and stories can be used to propel us, to inspire us and move us forward. And I think that's what's at the heart of this Africa Cinema Summit. So it's taking place in Ghana, and we are both very excited, and we say this all the time, especially on the audio podcast, that we are in the midst of an African storytelling renaissance, or more specifically, or more broadly, I should say, a Pan-African storytelling renaissance. I think it's a great time to be alive and to experience these stories, and they have the opportunity to bring these stories to life. Supercell, we're going to talk about that in our next episode, but that's an example of some storytelling that we never would have seen years ago, and the same goes for They Cloned Tyrone, and what was the other one that we just talked about the other day? They Cloned Tyrone, and
it's like a pop quiz.
It probably is a pop quiz. I think it was Supercell.
I think it was.
Episode 1.
But here's the thing, with this conference, is really focused, quite frankly, it's focused on content and stories coming out of the African continent.
That's right.
And what's exciting about that is
all of it.
Well, all of it, but in particular, going back to what we were talking about before in terms of making sure that there is inclusion. At the end of the day, large corporations are going to serve their own interests, net, right? And here's the best part, is that not too long from now, by 2030, 40% of global youth is going to be in Africa.
That's right.
And at the risk of making a stereotype, young people go watch movies. Young people watch television. Young people consume content. And young people are the future of economic progress.
Yes.
And so by having, 40%, that's a big slice of the pie.
And by 2050, literally 1 out of 4 people of any age will be living in Africa.
Right. And so the thing is that is the opportunity. And that's the opportunity to not only be participants in creating that content, because quite frankly, for the big players that want to come into the marketplace in Africa,
hopefully none.
Well, they're already coming in, but
hopefully none. Hopefully they're not coming with extraction on their mind.
Too late. But my point is,
not too late.
Well,
Battle of Adwa, stand up.
Too late in terms of them showing up.
Yeah.
But my point is that the opportunity is there, and it's already it's already happening. I mean, we see it with with shows we've talked about before, like Owaju and Kazazimoto. You see these studios, these animation, these creators, and going to my earlier point, they're getting funding from the Disneys of the world, from the Netflix of the world, from that, which allows them, because if you look at those studios whose names escape me at the moment, they're creating content for the African market that we have not seen here in America. And so, but how did they do it? Because they got their seed capital from Disney. They're making their reputation with Netflix. They're making their reputation with these larger plays that then allows them to grow and then address the market. And frankly, I can't imagine that Disney hasn't invested in some of these guys. And so good, let Disney make some money as an investor, because then once again, everyone wins. And it's, everyone wants a return on their investment. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think that by helping stand up these studios and stand up these resources, they're in Africa, in the place that's actually close to the content. They talk about, in my world as a consultant, we always talk about you want the solutions to be close to the problem. And same thing, you want your solutions, you want your offerings to be, close to the customer. They always talk in technology, often they talk about the last mile. You can deploy all these things, but how do you get to that? How do you get that last mile? How do you get that last little bit to actually get to those people? And same thing here, when it comes to storytelling, when it comes to entertainment, you have to bring the sensibilities and the awareness of the people that you're trying to tell the stories to. And to me, what's great about this summit is that they have an awareness of that. They have an awareness of, like, hey, our market could be as big, if not bigger, short term, as India or the United States, writ large. And those are considered the powerhouse markets for, I think they're talking about, the Africa Cinema Summit. So they're talking about movies, and I guess to an extent, streaming and other things. But I mean, having that awareness and saying, hey, we're not going to let this just happen to us. We're going to be, ladies and gentlemen, this whole episode's been brought to you by the word intentional.
Conscious and deliberate.
If they're being intentional about saying, let's make sure that we are going to be prepared and be ready to for as this wave continues on, because this has been going on for a little while. This is their second year, I believe, for this particular event, the Africa Cinema Summit. So africacinemasummit.com.
And if you have a chance to, what we're looking at right now is a document, a review of the last conference in 2023.
Yeah.
So on the homepage, you have a chance to download that document. And so there's a lot of information about that that is helpful as we as the diaspora, we as the Pan-African global family think about moving forward in regards to our own indigenous storytelling.
At the risk of cross-pollinating, for those of you who've been listening and watching, and you're part of some of those agencies we were talking about earlier, go download this brochure, because there's a lot of great information, which of course you can find elsewhere. But the way they distilled it, and it's really, if you're looking to go into the African market, this is like a primer on what's going on there, and from the details about last year's conference, excuse me.
Well, that to me, that invitation to me doesn't extend to everyone. To me, this is an invitation to Black-owned companies and indigenous companies, in my estimation. And the reason why I say that is there's such a huge market opportunity. I would hate to see that seized by the Disneys of the world, by these other larger global corporations that are only looking to exploit and enrich themselves, as opposed to an indigenous filmmaking, cinema, storytelling movement that celebrates us and simultaneously enriches us in a sustainable way.
You know what? I agree with you, and I think that should, and in all likelihood, they probably already have a copy of this information. Should the larger studios, I'm going to pick on Disney for a minute, even though I have to say that as a quick aside, I like the fact that Disney has brought these other studios from Africa into the tent, and they're making money because they're getting good ratings, and so they're going to do more of it. And I think that for those, if you're not part of the African diaspora and you happen to come across this document and you happen to come across this information, what you'll see is that, hey, there's money to be made here. But if you go in with not knowing the sensibilities, not having a local partner, not having anyone who's closer to that market, you're not going to be successful, because otherwise it would have already happened. I mean, there already is, penetration of the main Disney brand, the main Disney, properties there in Africa, but they're not doing as well as they would be if you had, for lack of a better term, that local flavor to it.
See, I agree and disagree. And the reason why I say that is that they provide some numbers about the indigenous ecosystem in regards to filmmaking. So there's only 1,700 screens currently in Africa. And they also say that 80% of the African population has never been to the cinema ever.
But that's the opportunity.
That is but if 80% of the population has never gone to the cinema before and is excited about going, if Disney gets there and just starts throwing up some content that they possess, it's great that people get to go to the cinema and experience things, but that's not really helping indigenous storytelling whatsoever. It's not helping indigenous entrepreneurs whatsoever. And so because the opportunity is so significant, I'm worried about the major players coming in and running roughshod over the continent. And that to me is altogether unacceptable. And
I agree, but I would say that if they were naive and showed up with the 1950s Cinderella animated movie and started showing that on these screens.
We watched all those movies because we had no other option.
Right.
So people are going to watch it just because they're looking to watch something, and there's still value and there's still some value in those non-black stories. I mean, so
my point is that if you're looking to have recurring revenue, okay, so fine, you throw out the 1950s, Cinderella, and you throw it on the screen. People are going to go see it because you said there's so many that have not seen anything, and they'll go there for the novelty and the spectacle of it. But then it's like, okay, I've done it, and you move on. If you want recurring revenue, you want things that are going to resonate with the people, and so it's going to have cultural relevance. I mean, I would venture to say that you
99% of the content that you and I both watched coming up had zero cultural relevance to us, but outside of the larger sort of mainstream general American. But relevance. It was relevant
because we were in American society.
That's what I'm saying. That's the only relevance.
But my point is, but that's not the society of the folks in Ghana. And so my point is that if you come in there and you're showing Ghanaian stories,
Right.
You're going to have much more. You're going to have better market penetration. You're going to have better ongoing revenue. You're going to have better ongoing success.
But if Disney comes in there producing Ghanaian content, is that a win, or are they or are they pimping the continent?
Well, I think that in order to have Ghanaian content, and this maybe I'm naive, they're probably going to have a Ghanaian partner. And that Ghanaian partner is going to, and maybe they won't. Maybe they get someone else. But odds are they're going to have, I think the easy way to do it would be if I'm not, is it Bob Iger? He's the one current head of Disney? I'm not Bob Iger. No one's going to mistake me for him. But my thing is that if I were him, the most economical thing to do, you could say, we're going to stand up a Ghanaian unit and do it from scratch. That, I think, would be hard. If I were Bob, I would go and say, hey, BC, go see if there's a Ghanaian studio that's already doing some successful things, and let's invest in them. And then, not only do we get, a toehold, a fingerhold in the Ghanaian market, and add more screens, but then, hey, maybe we have a new, fresh, set of IP that we can license from them and then bring back. And next thing you know, you've got Uwaju and Kazazimoto, and you've got all these other stories that you can then bring back to the mainstream market and say, look, we've got this, quote, fresh idea. And the people in Ghana are going to be like, that story we've seen 100 times, but it's new to us. And so that studio, and we've got it on our conversation page at our website. Go to our website, skyisblack.com or recollect.media /skyisblack to find the name of the studio. But that studio wins big because suddenly they, and yeah, you can make the comment about, oh, they're the toady for Disney, but meanwhile, they're suddenly creating all this content, and they're going to create great content for the Ghanaian market.
Right. So
I think that's a win.
We can make great content for the Ghanaian market with zero involvement from Disney. Disney is not required to be in this ecosystem or in this scenario at all.
But take their money.
Their money is not necessary. The money is not necessary. The African continent has everything necessary to do all of these things moving forward. Zero need for Disney to do anything.
I won't argue.
Zero.
I won't argue against that because I think that there certainly are plenty of resources available.
The Nigerian film industry is one of the biggest film industries in the world.
Yes.
And so people know how to create stories. We are storytelling people. We have no issues in terms of telling stories. We do that at an extremely high level.
I agree.
And so both telling the stories and building the infrastructure is not beyond any kind of indigenous capacity. And so to me, Disney doesn't factor into this scenario in my best case scenario whatsoever.
And that's why they have this conference. That's the purpose of this conference is to help, you take advantage of this market internally, in-house, in Africa. So I'm not disagreeing with you at all because they're aiming to be, a platform to bring the major players and decision makers in Africa, including working with the governments to help, cut the red tape and all that sort of stuff. That's what this conference is all about. And so, yes, my only point was to answer your question earlier when you said, hey, what happens when some of these outside players come in?
Right.
My only point, and this is sort of the short version of the story.
I'm saying dig out the wherever the foothold is, dig that out a little bit so there is no foothold.
Okay, fine, whatever. But my thought is that, odds are, if they're actually going to try to make that kind of a play, that they're going to need a local partner. And so
I hear what you're saying.
Work with the partner.
I hear what you're saying. Right. So here's what they say about the conference, or at least last year's conference. So Africa's potential as a powerhouse remains largely untapped, despite significant growth in production across the continent. With the right measures put in place, Africa's film and audiovisual industries could create over 20 million jobs and contribute 20 billion to the continent's combined GDP, as proposed by the 2021 UNESCO report.
That's billions with a B.
Yes, billions with a B. And so I don't think Disney or anybody else needs any more billions. We want to keep these billions on the continent.
Sure.
Period.
Sure. Right on. I love it. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's and we keep harping on these other two shows, partly because you can hear us talk more about them in our prior episodes. But that's exactly what's happening, even with Disney being involved, is that these studios are extant, in Lagos. The Kazazimoto guys. Actually, it's a whole collection of different animators, but they're based in Africa.
I think they're in South Africa, I do believe. The Kazazimoto people.
Okay, that's Africa.
No, that's what I'm saying. I think it's in South Africa specifically.
So my point is that I think it's a win for everyone, and I think that being intentional, going back to the word I keep hitting and harping on,
Conscious and deliberate.
is by being intentional and saying we're going to be organized, not let history repeat itself by having us be disjointed and fractured. By being organized, by being unified, we can create that 20 billion marketplace.
Preach, brother.
And so that, to me, is why this
Preach,
conference
brother.
is fantastic. And that's why I think we should be supportive of it, even from a distance. And if we can participate and be involved, if you can participate and be involved, I would certainly encourage you to do so. Once again, AfricaCinemaSummit.com.
Yes.
To me, that is really what moves us all forward, is that, and I don't mean just us specifically, those in the Black diaspora, but I think all of us as humanity, we all want to move forward. I believe that people of goodwill want to live in an interesting and harmonious world.
Right. We want everyone to move forward,
Right.
just not at our expense.
Correct, 100%. And so I love. I mean, all these events we're talking about are ones that do indeed move us forward.
Let's hope so.
And I think that if nothing else, for people who weren't being intentional, if you attend these conferences or if you find out more about these conferences, it will encourage you to be more intentional. And that, I think, if nothing else, having that bearing, that heading, choosing a direction that you're going to go in,
Wakaddis.
being intentional will benefit anyone in their life, because otherwise you're just adrift. And so, if nothing else, I hope, dear viewer, you've gotten that from this, is be intentional. Check out these things. Once again, we're talking about the Africa Cinema Summit. We're talking about Black Week, and then the Black Tech Conference, Black Tech Week, that just passed, but will be coming up next July. So be sure to check those out. You can find out more about us, I said a moment ago, at recollect.media/skyisblack, skyisblack.com. On Twitter, X, and Instagram, it's skyis.
_ B to the L to the C to the K.
And then on Facebook, it's skyis.
No _ B to the L to the C to the K.
And so you can go and hit rewind to go catch our emails. So be sure to reach out to us. If you've attended any of these conferences, if you went to Africa Cinema Summit last year, let us know. Send us your pictures.
Yes.
Post us. Come into our DMs. Let us know, because we believe in the power of storytelling. We believe strongly in the power of our stories.
Yes, indeed.
How much they are. You couldn't even get rid of it. I mean, I guess there's a little bit of black in everything. And so I think that you will see us everywhere as we move forward in the future. And we are indispensable as
Worldwide,
we move
baby.
into the future. So with that, I want to thank you all for watching us here. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel here, Sky is Black, and Sky is intentional.
Sky is conscious.
Sky is deliberate.
Even more deliberate.
I stole your line. I love it.
You did. I know you did. Sky is delicious. Sky is etouffee.
And dear listener and viewer, if you find someone who makes good etouffee in Cincinnati, let me know, because that way I'll know where to go when you find it. Sky is barbecue.
Yes. Sky is barbecue.
Sky is black.
sky is barbecue.